Well, anything ranging from a court case, a lawyer's office, and an engineering practice, hospitals. These are all services that Kanban could help deliver. This is the agenda today. I won't read through it because we are going to go through it in the next 45 minutes. And first, I would like to address the Agile and Lean decision filters. A lot of people talk about Agile, a lot of people talk about Lean, but it's important to know the difference between the two. They are both 21st century managerial methods, and it is really where the future lies. Agile decision filters. Agile aims for effectiveness right at the start. And the decision filter is as follows. Are we making progress with imperfect information? Are we encouraging a high trust culture? And are we treating work in progress as a liability rather than an asset? If you make your decision according to this paradigm, then you are really using an Agile decision filter. And Agile goes right at the top of the pyramid. They aim for it. It aims for effectiveness, delivering the right product as quickly as possible with imperfect information. Lean, however, starts with efficiency and wants to aim at the effectiveness second. So the way we think in Lean is that value trumps flow, flow trumps waste elimination, and as a third item, we want to eliminate waste to improve efficiency by reducing transaction, coordination, and failure costs. So as you're deciding on what to do on a day-to-day basis, evaluate your decisions against these Lean's priority or these Agile priorities. Agile and Lean, both of them aim to fight against cost. For example, Agile, by pursuing a very high trust environment, has a direct impact on transaction cost, unneeded communication cost, limiting the number of handoffs, Agile documentation, Agile modeling, and so on. So Agile has really had a big impact on curbing these costs. Coordination costs are mainly involved when two people or more work on a common goal. Now, finding the right person for a meeting, getting the right approval for a deliverable. These are all things related to coordination cost. And there are two antidotes to coordination cost. The first one, well, is self-organization. Now, both Lean and Agile, are fans of this self-organization paradigm. The other antidote to coordination cost is small batch size. Now, small batch size, of course, will probably end up in causing you more transactions. So there is a balance to be had here. But the nice thing about Lean is that Lean doesn't have the concept of batch size. So the second antidote to coordination costs, which is to have small batch sizes, is not an issue for Lean as we aim for flow efficiency. And third, failure costs caused by poor quality, rework, bugs, misunderstanding, dark matter. Well, everybody has the same issue, and there's no antidote to that per se. You just have to get better as you go along. Another difference, philosophical difference between Lean and Agile, is that Lean is a philosophy of pursuing perfection. Lean believes in perfection. And Agile has this underlying idea that you make progress with imperfect information, and you course correct later as you learn more. And Lean associates all rework with waste. So at this point, there are differences. Another difference between Lean and Agile is how people are considered in the two philosophies. In Lean, there is a system thinking view. The idea is that people performance is largely influenced by the system they are part of, and the way you respect people is that it's to design a system that allows them to work effectively. Agile has a more humanistic approach to people and respect them as individuals. The Agile philosophy argues that people should be left alone to do the right thing, and that the best results come from self-organization with people that know the context. With respect to people, Lean and Agile are very different. Lean respects people in terms of a team by giving them a good system to work within which to work, and Agile respects individuals. Principles and practices. There are 6 principles in Kanban, and the first 3 are called change management, but they should really call antidote to resistance to change management, because by starting with what you know, with what you do now, by agreeing to pursue improvement through evolutionary change, and encouraging acts of leadership at every level, when you come with such a method, how could people resist that? You know, there's no way, there's no shock, and there's no new deliverables or artifacts that are being imposed upon you, new roles or responsibility, because you start with what you do now. So it's a great approach. And of course, we have the 3 last principles: survey delivery oriented, understand and focus on customers' needs, manage the work, and let people self-organize around it, and evolve policies to improve outcomes. Now, today, for the remainder of the day, we're going to focus in on the core practices. Now, this is really where you become Lean. Visualize workflow, limit work in progress, manage flow, make process policies explicit so that there is a shared understanding, develop feedback loops, and improve collaboratively and evolve experimentally. So of those 6 core practices, we will focus on the first 4 only for today. And let's start. Now we'll explain how we can understand and build Kanban boards. First, you identify a service, a TV show, a court case, a fashion design, or HR services. You identify the flow of work where discovery activities take place, and you build a column, give it a business name to each of these accumulator of WIPs, and just wanted to stress on the second line that I said the flow of work instead of workflow, because there is a lot of confusion when we start talking about workflow. So I really mean the flow of work where discovery activities take place. Now for the 4th bullet, break down each cube with 2 additional columns and progress and done, and fill the board with work tickets or user stories. This looks hard indeed, and there is much more. So let's start. So let's go for the flow of creative work or software. We have ideas coming up, analysis, development, test, and ready for production. Now, second step is to fill the board with work, with ideas, and all sorts of tickets which are of different colors. And once the work is filled, Kanban obviously wants to pull work onto the next phase. Like we see, we have a lot of development items that are done, and we wish to pull them onto test. And this is the way we proceed. When test has capacity, it pulls items from development. And development can never push something onto test until test requires so. So we have now the situation where it's hard to distinguish within any given column or queue what is being worked on and what has been done. So this is why in every queue in Kanban we subdivided further down into a working column and a done column to ease the pull of flow. That's one of the, that would be the first reason. The second reason is that whenever a ticket ends up in the done column, it's not being worked on. It's sitting idle. And for flow efficiency, we want to account that time when a ticket sits idle. And obviously, all tickets that would be in a working column, we assume that they are really being worked on. So, fitting back again with the same work, we gain a bit of clarity. We can see that in development, for example, everything's done, nothing's being worked on. Interesting, might be an issue here. And ideas, looks like we might need to replenish this at some time. And see how easy it is now to pull work. Because now, being in a done column, all of the items in development can easily be visually identified as being done and can be then pulled into the test working column. And the same for analysis. There is an item there that is done, and it can be pulled into the working column of development. Now, just as a reminder, the analysis, development, test, and ready for prod are what we call queues, and they are accumulator of work in process. Now, how do we read a Kanban board? Remember at the beginning I said stop starting, start finishing? Well, guess what? When you go in front of a Kanban board, you got to start from the right and go to the left. Why? Because whatever is closer to production is what is being done in test. And this is what you should focus in on. If problems arrive in analysis, there's still a long way to going into production, and there will be less of a priority than an issue that would be arising in either development or test. So it's important to remember that when you do read a Kanban board, you start from the right and you go to the left. Stop starting, start finishing. Now, you know that when we have a Scrum meeting, a stand-up, we ask 3 questions, and you all know what they are. But in Kanban, we basically have 2 statements. Who's stuck, who's too busy, and who's idle. Why? Because Kanban, we're focused on flow efficiency. And when the manager says, let's do something about it, the it means a bottleneck. And every time you have a bottleneck, it hurts flow. And every time flow is hurt, you have to do something about it. So when you see the gentleman that says, I'm idle, well, he's at the wrong side of a bottleneck. And the other individual who says, I'm stuck, is again at the wrong side of a bottleneck. And the person who says, I'm too busy, well, guess what? Is the bottleneck. And this is where we can identify bottleneck in order to improve flow. These 3 statements are key in identifying bottlenecks. Now, let's bring some more clarity to our Kanban board. We saw all these tickets with, different colors, and at the end, at the bottom of the screen, we can easily now label each of these tickets to make it easier to write, like block tickets, expedite tickets, sales tickets, finance, dev, and ops. This is, again, an improvement, an embellishment on a Kanban board that makes it easier to read. So far, all the Kanban boards that we've seen are valid, but we're now just having them step forward to better embellishment and better clarity. We're making progress on them. So visualization is the best medicine to reduce complexity. And now, by looking at the boards that we've just seen, we can identify that there's a starvation of idea, there's idle time for development, and we sure have a bottleneck in front of the test queue. And let's see why. Well, obviously, we only have one item and the idea queue, and it will be a good time to have a conversation about replenishment with the product owner. And this can all be done visually. You know, this board, the Kanban board, is a leading indicator of problems that you can have. It won't be yesterday's news. It's today's news. It's now. It's happening now, and you can fix it. It's a leading indicator. So the Kanban board, again, tells us that development is just not working. There's no ticket in the working column of the development queue. Everything is done, and it's just sitting there. It's not being pulled by test, meaning that test has no capacity to pull the work. So what does that tell us? Well, it basically tells us that test is a bottleneck. There is something going on in test that needs to be inquired. So another way that we could make this Kanban board better is to create a few classes of service. Class of service are basically swim lanes. And when you do that, you can do away with the colors that we had before, identifying a ticket as being either for sales, finance, or DevOps. So it's an enrichment to the boards that we've done so far, and it makes for a clearer Kanban board, and it's totally legitimate. But now we see that for Expedite, sales, finance, and DevOps, we've included some class of service information, SLA type of service information. Like when a ticket is Expedite, it's all hands on deck. Like everybody has to come and deliver value. Sales, we see we have an SLA of 5 days, 80% of the time. Finance, 30 days, an SLA of 30 days, 90% of the time. And DevOps, well, no SLA, small request and best effort. This is the way our Kanban system works in this particular webinar, the right or wrong Kanban board. So you see, when we have an Expedite item, all hands on deck, because we want to create value. But what does that do to the flow of all the other tickets? Well, they're being slowed down. And Kanban, you know, is about flow. So let's go back to our lean decision filter. Value trumps flow. So what I did, putting something in the Expedite line at the expense of flow to maximize value, is perfectly legitimate. So I took a decision that hurts flow, but I'm getting in value. So it's a good call. Next, let's look at the SLA and the classes of service. In Kanban, we don't believe in estimating work, because estimating is speculative work. And we wish instead to use science and probabilistic forecasting. And this is why for sales, we have an SLA of 5 days, 80% of the time. We want to avoid, for each ticket, each user stories, meeting with a client and saying, this is going to take 5 days, this is going to take 8 days. We're wasting time estimating. And this creates frustration when we never hit the mark, and we never hit the mark. So it's much better to let go of these deterministic estimates and to go with probabilistic forecasting. Now, it's hard to do, but it will save you a lot of time, a lot of waste. And how do we do that? Well, basically, you have information on the way your company operates. The airline industry, the fast food industry, the hotel industry, all work with probabilistic forecasting. And why shouldn't IT do the same? Or your HR service, or an hospital for that matter. So by gathering data, you can have this nice distribution that we have here of lead time, and pick an SLA that you want, and avoid confrontation with your clients when you get into giving predictable deterministic estimates which are always a cause of frustration and impacting trust. Now, Lean is a scientific manner, and we measure. The first thing that we do measure is lead time calculation. Lead time calculation starts when your team takes ownership of a product, a ticket, or change request, and start working on it. It's the time that it takes from going through analysis all the way down to test. You write the start date and you write the end date, and this is your lead time calculation. How hard is that? It's not, and it's crucial. It gives you a lot of information about your performance, and it helps build trust with the customer, and it helps build more historical data with which you can do probabilistic forecasting, saving you a lot of time not doing estimates. Now, one step further on our Kanban board, we're improving as we move along. On top, I've put circles with number. They're actually WIP limits. Kanban wants to limit the amount of work that you do at any given point in time, because when you have a ticket in a working column, it means you are working on it. So, by putting WIP limits and classes of service, we have a Kanban board that helps us with improved risk governance, resource allocation, and workforce liquidity visibility. Now, I just took and wrote down whatever number of tickets were for those WIP limits, but these can change over time. They could even change tomorrow, and as a matter of fact, for ideas, it should change like in the next hour, because we only have one. We have 6 items which as a WIP limit for analysis, 6 for development, 2 for test, and ready for prod is an infinite queue. It's outside of our control, it's outside of the Kanban system, and it's just something that we just push away for production, and it's another team, let's assume, that takes care of that. Now, why do we want to limit with the amount of work that you have as a team or as an individual? Well, there is something called the Zeigarnik effect. Our mind has an overwhelming desire to finish what we have started. And we feel a tendency to experience intrusive thoughts about an objective left incomplete. And this is true for all humans. We're all like that. The more we have in our head, the we. So when we are prevented from finishing a task, we are left in a state of tension, which manifests itself in improved memory for the uncompleted task. So we're constantly being taken away from that which we should be working on when we have too much work. Another thing is that the more outstanding task we have, the more difficult it becomes for us to pursue any single objective with interrupted concentration. And lastly, unfinished tasks tend to constantly interrupt our thoughts, a sort of autopilot system reminding us what needs to be completed. So limiting WIP is not just a wish, it's something that has a scientific basis. And instinctively, all of us know this, but we don't put it into practice. And Kanban is there for you as a team, as a group, to agree on WIP limits so that you can be working without having too heavy a workload. So, coming back to this Kanban board, we see that ready for prod is what we call an infinite queue. And this is where Kanban ends. The Kanban system ends at the first infinite queue, a queue with which we just let go of the work and pass it on to somebody else. And of course, whatever lies in the expedite lane does not count toward WIP limits. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember. Whenever you want to use the expedite lane, it does not count toward WIP limits, but everybody has to come and swarm on that ticket. One step further that we can see is take a look at our capacity to explain some things that we've been wondering about for a while. What was going on in test? Well, guess what? There's only one worker. No wonder works accumulate in front of test. And we see that in development, we have 6 individuals who are sitting idle. Maybe with some cross-training or without any cross-training, they could come and help the tester. Remember that Kanban in the short run is preoccupied with demand and capacity, demand and supply. And when looking at a situation like this, we know that we can do something about it right away, right this moment, to help alleviate the problem that's going on in test. So the solution here, I say, would be to maybe take 1 or 2 persons from development to help test. Because now test is acting as a bottleneck and it's killing flow upstream. Like not all of the done tickets and development are really stuck there because they can't enter the test queue. So now we have to entertain a new concept, which is flow efficiency. Flow efficiency starts at the analysis point and ends at the first infinite queue. It's the same time span as lead time. But flow efficiency is a key metric and must be calculated as well. And it's not that hard to do. Flow efficiency basically is the amount of time that you work over lead time. What percentage of time is a ticket being worked on over the total time that it takes to go through? So flow efficiency measures the percentage of total lead time that is actually spent adding value or knowledge versus waiting. And here's a trick of why we use the done column, is that anything that's in the done column or any done column is basically time spent waiting because the ticket is done and nobody's working on it. However, whatever ticket is appearing in a working column, it's very important that it's actually being worked on, because if it's not the case, it means that your width is too high and that in fact tickets that are in the working column are in fact being idle, which is not meant to be that way. Because when you do your flow calculation, it's really easier when a ticket that is being worked on really shows in the working column, and then when it's done, it's really done and it's not being worked on. So we see at the bottom that lead time and flow efficiency have the same time span. That for flow efficiency, we can see a ticket that is in working state, waiting state, working state, waiting state, and these are important to account for. When you have too many items in the working column, it means that you're multitasking. And when you're multitasking, well, you have to switch context, you have to re-immerse yourself in the new environment, and you basically waste time. And this is why limiting width has benefits, is that you minimize the cost of context switching. Now you might ask me, what is a good flow efficiency ratio? Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be very surprised to know that flow efficiency of 1 to 5% are commonly reported. Now this is amazing, eh? Because 95% of the time, our work is not progressing anywhere. And we say we can't measure. I think we say we ought to measure. And if you can ever achieve a flow efficiency greater than 40%, you are doing very well. But you won't know until you measure. And in a Kanban system, it is possible to measure such statistics, and it's not that hard to do. Now, we see that in tests we have a bottleneck and that work seems to be piling up in front of it, and it hurts flow. So a good thing to do would be to put a buffer in front of this bottleneck. We just realized a few slides ago that we only have one tester and that her time is precious, and that if she's kept idle, it means that we're going to impact flow in a very, very, very bad manner. So what we'll do is we'll accumulate work in front of her, and we'll create a queue so that she's never kept idle. So you see, we've created a new queue, which is called Ready for Test, and we've allowed 20 items, up to 20 items, to go there. This new queue that we put in front of a bottleneck, it's what we really call a buffer in Kanban. And we always identify buffer with the first word ready. Ready for test is the example here. And now, all the items that were in the down column for development can be pulled into this ready for test buffer. And now we can see the flow of work starting. We can take now whatever was done in the analysis queue and pull it into the working column of the development queue, and so on for the idea. It can move. Now we have created a buffer to enable flow. But what have we done? We have increased the work in process and the waste. And does this make sense? Well, if we go back to our lean decision filter, it does. Because increased WIP is required to maintain flow, even though it will add waste. And we do add waste, but we respect our lean decision filter. So you see here, the WIP columns, the total above, we've added a 20 items additional for the work in process of the old system. We've created waste, but look how flow is easier. We've enabled a better flow, and we've created waste, but we respect the lean decision filter. That flow trumps waste elimination. So we're doing good. We're making decisions that are coherent with the lean decision filter. Sometimes the decisions are counterintuitive. Now, we can see that blockers, buffers, and done items on a day one of let's say of this week, we have to account for them in terms of waiting time for flow efficiency. So on each of these tickets, we can put a blue dot. This blue dot will mean that when they exit the system, we'll be able to take the start time, the start date and the end date, which is our lead time, and calculate our flow efficiency by subtracting the amount of time that the items in the done column or in the ready for test buffer, or those who are blocked. For example, in test, we have a pink item which is blocked, but we have to account for those as well. Moving on to day two, well, we had more dots to those tickets so that we can get a good flow efficiency metric. And the same thing for the third day, and the same thing for the fourth day. So visually, every time that a ticket is not being worked on, somebody has to go and put a visual indicator on it to do proper accounting on flow efficiency. Now let's see what a ticket, a Kanban ticket, would look like. Well, of course, you would need a ticket, a title. You can choose a color. You can put a risk classification on it if you wish to. You can put priority. And here at the bottom, I'm going to flash it a few times. You see the days elapse. So every time a day passes, you mark it on the ticket. And whenever a day is being wasted in the done column, you can change it and put it in another color like blue. And when it's stuck as being blocked, you can put it in red. And when it's stuck waiting in a buffer, you can put it in yellow. And this way, you can adapt and do your calculation. Of course, at the end of the cycle, at the end of lead time, you have your start date and your end date. So you're able to see that you have 20 days elapsed and that you got 5 or 6 days that were wasted and waiting in the waiting state. And with this, easily, you can get your flow efficiency metric. And this is the way to do some analysis on the blockers and also on the wait on your WIP limits. Because if you spend too much time waiting, it probably means that you have too much work currently in progress. One last thing that you may want to do, and that actually you must do, is to make your policies explicit. For example, in analysis, you have to state that your goals are clear, that the tests are written before you start coding, and that the first tasks are really, really well defined by the product owner. And the development column, well, we always want clean code at the end of the day. We want code that is checked in every week. We want code that has passed UAT, that is integrated, and that has received the client's approval. Evidently, the buffer ready for test has no policy, but it does has a WIP limit. And test, the policies for test are small tests have been done, capacity is okay, documentation is approved, the backup seems to be working fine, and versioning is all done. So making these policies explicit create a shared understanding and create a better cohesion for the team. Now, we've seen a little while ago, all throughout our Kanban board today, that between idea and analysis, the first commitment point, there's no column. You know, we go directly from ideas to analysis. But there is a thing called Upstream Kanban, which between the idea and the commitment point, the fifth column, well, you can actually do analysis. Kanban doesn't like to do estimate, but it's all for analysis. So whatever pool of ideas you have, you can do a business case development. And let's say you have WIP limit of 24 to 48. Then they can move on to requirements analysis with a WIP limit of 12 to 24 items that you may want to support at any time, at any point in time. Ready for engineering, between 4 and 12 tickets. And by doing so, by looking at your options, you can discard some of them and you can reject, you know, because after analysis you may decide that it's not worth your while. So Upstream Kanban is also very important because it allows you to keep your option open and to marshal options, and the committed work is basically what we've discussed since the beginning of this webinar, is to manage the flow. Managing the flow, the delivery part, as opposed to managing the discovery part with digging deeper into options. Now, why is it that we rather have analysis than estimation? Estimation is speculative work. If we look at the verb to estimate, it's to calculate approximatively. Now, that looks very speculative, and we don't like that in Kanban. But if you look at the verb to analyze, it means to examine methodically by separating into parts and studying their interrelations. Now, analysis is good. We believe into it, but we don't believe in Kanban and speculative work. So this is why Upstream Kanban is a good idea. We're nearing the conclusion, but I have a few slides. When we're dealing with flow efficiency and resource efficiency, when in doubt between flow efficiency, which is idle work, and resource efficiency, idle worker, think lean. And what does that mean? Well, let me give you an idea. Let's take the 400-meter race at the Olympics and the 4 times 100 relay, 100-meter relay. 400-meter relay will do so, let's say, in 40 seconds. He is utilized 100% of the time. If, however, you have the 4 times 100-meter relay, the baton will cross the distance in 36 seconds, which is 4 seconds better. But at any given time and point of time, there are 3 workers not working. So how can it be that our flow is more efficient and that the resource efficiency is lower? Because we focus on work. We don't focus on idle worker. And this is a change that has to happen in order for you to deliver within the Kanban paradigm. Now let's look another explanation of this lean Kanban paradigm. Flow efficiency versus resource efficiency. On the upper left quadrant, you see massive investment in technology, fixed cost, and all that. This is good for the long term, you know, like at some point you got to invest in your company, you got to build up your infrastructure, your knowledge, your training. But in the very short run, Kanban is a day-to-day thing. It's flow efficiency. You impact demand with your supply and your capacity. This is what you have to match in the day-to-day, in day-to-day life in order for flow efficiency to work. You don't have time to go into a 3-year project to build a new infrastructure. You deal with the hands that you're dealt, and you deal by matching supply, capacity with demand. So on the lower right corner, you see a fireman. Well, he's not always busy, but when there's a fire, when there's work, he's available. And this is how you go to the nirvana of lean. It's by focusing in on flow efficiency and not on resource efficiency. So what does that mean? Well, let's revisit again our lean decision filter and the third item, which is eliminate ways to improve efficiency by reducing transaction, coordination, and failure cost. Well, translated means do not pursue economies of scales by investing in fixed in the short run and massive investments, but rather curb demand with available capacity and classes of service. So this concludes my part, and Laureen, would there be questions?
We currently don't have any questions. You've covered everything very thoroughly. So for right now, we'll hang out for a few more minutes in case anybody has some questions now that we've concluded. And also, as you'll see in front of you there, we have a couple of upcoming public courses at our office in Fairfax, Virginia. We have our Certified Scrum Master course in July, and then our Certified Kanban Foundations course in September. So if anything in this webinar you want to learn more and get certified in Kanban, that would be a great class. So if you have any questions or anything, my contact information is there at the bottom. So feel free to reach out, and I can help you with signups or any additional information. And now we actually are getting a couple of questions rolling in here. So the first one is, could you please mention work in progress limiting strategy you have been practicing?
Okay. Basically, work in process is linked to context switching. Science has shown that the human brain can only work on 1 or 2 items at a time. As soon as you start getting onto 3 or 4, 5, 6 items, your performance is being decreased. And your efficiency goes down the drain because you have to switch context all the time. So this is where, as a knowledge worker, you have to be aware of that and stop the abuse. And when you are with a group, you make rules of thumbs. You know, you're a 6 people team. Make sure that you don't have more than 12 things at the same time. So always remember that a maximum of 2 things per head, per person. And when you're a group, apply this, scale it up to the number of people that you are. And this is a good rule of thumb to avoid being abused in terms of workload and become inefficient.
Great.
Yeah.
The next question is, can you elaborate on how creating the buffer queue prior to test actually helped one QA team member?
Okay. The worst thing that you want is in front of a bottleneck. The person that is the bottleneck, you don't want that person to go idle. Let's say that you have a doctor and you have a doctor's office. Now this is a very skilled person and very high in demand. This is why they put the files on his door, so that there is a buffer, so that he doesn't have to wait. If this knowledge worker becomes idle, it will worsen the bottleneck, it will worsen flow. So when you have non-instant availability, you have to put a buffer, just so that that person doesn't become starved and runs out of work, because then you really, really create an impact. Of course, it will create more waste in the system, but flow efficiency will be the winner.
Okay. And then another one is, it seems like you just duplicated the done column under development and increased the WIP limit. How does this communicate that testing needs help?
Okay. Let me go to the slide. When we look at the resources, we see that we are limited in terms of capacity in the test column because there's only one person. And work is being accumulated in front of that person. You see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tickets that are done, but they can't be pulled into the test into the test column because the tester is overwhelmed. Now, the side story to this is that if ever there is no work coming into the test, that the tester becomes starved for work, you will really hurt flow efficiency in a bad manner. So this is why, of course, there are solutions here. You can have developers come and help the tester, and we could increase the WIP limit in that moment. But the solution that I chose was to basically insert a buffer in front of test to show you that sometimes to promote flow efficiency, you need to create more waste, and you have to protect the idle workers from, especially when they're specialists and they're causing a bottleneck, from running out of work.
Okay, that is all the questions we have so far. So again, we'll hang out here for a few more minutes. Oh, one just came in. Can you suggest best book reference to understand the optimum upstream activities?
What was the last part of the question?
Can you suggest the best book reference to understand optimum upstream activities?
Well, there are many good books, and of course the Bible is by Dave Anderson, the creator of the Lean Kanban University. It's called, it's the blue book. The title eludes me, but I'll make sure I give you the right title. And it's also another book which is very excellent, which is called Kanban in Action. It's a really great book. Those two books will be the best book to start.
Great. She says, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions anybody has? Go ahead and submit them in the next couple of minutes. All right, I think with that, we haven't received any other questions so far, so we will go ahead and end this webinar. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Daniel, for being our presenter today.
Thank you.